Breaking news as the Denver Broncos have traded wide receiver Devaughn Vele to the New Orleans Saints. We're going to tell you why they fleeced New Orleans on today's bonus episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We hope you didn't have Devaughn Vele and Sharpie as wide receiver 2 on your Denver Broncos roster predictions here as we approach cut down day, but the Broncos have made a move. Broncos Country, Devaughn Vele going to the New Orleans Saints. We got a lot to talk about what the Broncos got in return, which a pretty nice haul for them and what this means for the wide receiver group moving forward. But want to just say thank you to all of you for making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. My name is Sayre Bedinger alongside Cody Roark, and we are your co-hosts here of Locked On Broncos every single day as well, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And Cody, this is why the folks should be subscribed, right? Because you never know when the Broncos are going to hit us with some breaking news. I just finished eating some supper, you know what I'm saying? And you give me a call. This is why you got to be on your toes with Sean Payton, or you never know when the smoke's going to be coming up out of the building. But Devaughn Vele no longer part of this team. Kind of crazy. The team officially announcing that he was traded to the New Orleans Saints. Let's first talk about this return here. I think the Broncos got a really good haul, maybe an offer they couldn't refuse for Devaughn Vele.
I mean, yeah, when you go back and you factor in that Devaughn Vele was initially a 7th-round pick last year, the New Orleans Saints in 2026 are giving up a 4th-round pick for him and a 2027 7th-round pick. That's something that you absolutely have to take here, Sarah. You get 2 additional draft capital picks for one player who, look, I think has some great upside. He's going to add some value, I think, right away to what the Saints want to do offensively down there. Gives him a big body target, that can maybe spell and take some pressure off of Chris Olave, who's going to see a lot of attention. The ability to move Vele around a little bit is going to be good for New Orleans. But for the Broncos, it really is a sign of them saying, hey, we're going to get draft capital here. We already knew we were going to have to make a tough decision. When it comes to roster cuts next week, Vele was kind of in that consideration, as you and I kind of have talked about on social media this week. We actually, funnily enough, Broncos Country recorded an episode about 3 players who have the most to prove in Saturday's finale. We had Vele on that, so we're going to have to change that up here, obviously going forward into tomorrow's episode of the show. But for Denver to get this value, I think is good. Like George Payton, once again, put the memes out there, stunting on people. The Broncos get good capital in return for a player who's going to have an impact elsewhere, and it really solidifies this Broncos wide receiver room going into 2025.
It definitely does, and it's a great trade for George Payton. Obviously, he struck a similar trade. I can't say it's overly comparable. It's comparable in terms of the compensation coming back, but you remember the Trinity Benson trade with Detroit where he got a 5th and 7th, I believe. Very, very similar to this haul of a 4th and a 7th for Devaughn Vele. Now, the 4th-round pick is going to be in the 2026 draft. The 7th-round pick is in the 2027 NFL draft, so separate years there, but those are lottery tickets in the 7th round that you always want to have as a GM in case you want to make deals like this. Like the Broncos could be in position to do something like this. So, but now they have 5 selections in the top 4 rounds of next year's draft, Cody, which gives you ample flexibility, of course. And to get rid of a player like Devaughn Vele, yes, it is tough, but at the same time, he's 27 going on 28 this year. You and I have discussed that and why that's kind of an odd tension in Broncos country about whether or not he has a viable long-term future with the team. And I think just Troy Franklin, Pat Bryant, those guys were too good this offseason to really justify, like you and I have talked, you got to dress all 6 guys if you're going to keep them. Well, the Broncos instead decided, hey, Vele, he might be able to be the 2nd wide receiver or 3rd wide receiver in New Orleans. We're going to give him that opportunity while giving these other younger guys an opportunity in Denver.
Sean Payton said it last week during a post-practice presser that he didn't mention wide. I think he actually mentioned wide receiver specifically. He said, we're going to have the situation where one of these guys is on a 53 somewhere else. And I think really that was kind of like the smoke. And it's like, all right, there's smoke. Where is that coming from? Is there a fire burning here a little bit? You start to see some of the injuries pop around. You start to see some of the inquiries some teams were making about wide receiver. And immediately it's like, oh, our ears perked up. Devaughn Vele is probably the more likely guy. Did not play in that second preseason game, which, some people were saying it's an indicator that he's a starter, whereas it really wasn't the case. That was hey, we want to protect him because we may be working on something here. But this, I want to be very clear here. This has nothing to do with anything that Devaughn Vele did or didn't do. This has everything to do with the emergence of rookie Pat Bryant, the impact where he's kind of picked things up in the offense very, very quickly, and the second-year leap that we have seen here from Troy Franklin. As I've kind of detailed and noted over at milehighsports.com in my written columns, we've seen a lot of Pat Bryant and Troy Franklin with Bo Nix and Courtland Sutton over the course of the last couple of weeks. Not to say that's an indicator, because we know Sean has liked to rotate guys, but that's usually the first week and a half of training camp practice, maybe going into those 2 weeks of camp there. It has been clear as day that Bryant and Franklin have overtaken Vele, who has missed some time during practice, and obviously mandatory minicamp. But this has everything to do with the emergence of those guys and not necessarily anything that Vele did or didn't do.
Absolutely. So for any Saints fans that may stumble upon this content because they're wondering about Devaughn Vele, we have nothing but really positive things to say, right? I mean, obviously 41 catches last year, 26 first downs, big body receiver. He can move the chains. He proved to be a much more reliable target than, well, a lot of the other guys on the Denver Broncos roster last year, quite frankly. But obviously when you have other guys emerging in the offseason, and like you mentioned, Troy Franklin and Pat Bryant, Cody, not only are those guys making plays when the ball comes their way, but they're doing the dirty work as well. There's a lot of film review out there from you and others showing that these guys are willing to block and they are physical. So the Broncos got a couple of guys breaking through this offseason. I wouldn't say it was necessarily unexpected, but this goes to show that what Sean Payton said back in January, February about the wide receiver room was true. Like, he's like, I don't think the receiver room is as bad as people are saying, right? And now you have very much so proof of that, because the Saints really liked what they saw enough in Vele last year. There's nothing on tape from this year's preseason, so they're going strictly on what he did last year. Vele is obviously impressed around the league with what he was able to do and what he can do as a big slot, which is going to be obviously important to Kellen Moore and those guys. So I think for the Broncos, we say it's a fleece because we didn't expect to get a fourth and something else, right? Cody, you and I were talking on the episode we were doing for tomorrow that it would be, I mean, maybe a can't miss deal if it was a fifth rounder coming back.
Yeah. And look, I think you always wonder what those numbers are going to look like. And Sean Payton said it even just, I think, a couple of days ago after practice, that we field calls, and sometimes where the conversation is, what are you looking for? And we look at it, what are we looking for? What does the compensation look like? And for both sides, this makes sense. And really for the Saints, who are trying to figure out their quarterback competition between Tyler Shuck and obviously Spencer Rattler, to me, I view this as more of Devaughn Vele could be a QB-proof type of player for them over there in New Orleans, where he can go out there and make plays. And of course, they got to see Vele last year. Even though Darren Rizzi was the interim head coach, that Saints brass got to see a lot of Vele in that game. He had some impactful catches there from Bo Nix on Thursday Night Football. But yeah, I mean, for Denver to get this, now it allows them to have flexibility in terms of capital going into next year, where we know from a salary cap standpoint, they're going to be in much better shape, considering that $33 million of that dead cap from Russell Wilson's deal, that impacts this year. It's off the books next year. Denver's got a lot of flexibility, and right now they could strike while the iron is hot in terms of being able to maximize where they're at. If they have a big season this year, if the Broncos go deeper in the playoffs, and the excitement around this team is going to be entirely different than it already is right now. And, want to wish Devaughn Vele the best. Was always great in the locker room. He's going to be a nice piece to add to the mix over there in New Orleans. And now really the question becomes, Sayre, and we'll talk about this, what does the wide receiver room look like here for this Broncos football team going into 2025 with the move of Devaughn Vele? We'll talk about those roles and more here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos.
Today's episode, Locked On Broncos, is brought to you by Gametime. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize that you want to be in the stands, right? That's exactly where Gametime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without all the stress. And with the money that you save on tickets, you can then splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Gametime makes it possible. And Gametime also makes buying tickets fast and simple. And prices on the app, they actually drop the closer you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying.
Well, if you're tired of endless scrolling, trying to find the best deal, Gametime, they make it easy with their Zone Deals pick, where it picks the best seat in your section for you. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. Me, Cody, we're going to be playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first timer or you're a veteran making your millionth league.
And to celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout August. To kick it off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're more into the classics, you can still play in head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL.
The Denver Broncos have 5 guys at their wide receiver position. Are they going to add more? Are they done? Are they solidified for this coming season? We think that they've got their top 5 and that it's going to be pretty set in stone, but you never know when somebody else might come along and join the fray. Welcome, Broncos Country, to a breaking news episode of the show. Of course, we're so appreciative of every single one of you tuning in every day here at Locked On Broncos. Don't forget to take a couple seconds, if you haven't already done so, hit subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as on YouTube, and join the community. Get us at the top of your algorithm so you don't miss episodes like this one that come out. It's Cody, it does seem like the Broncos, Sean Payton kind of likes 5 players at wide receiver. I know that sometimes you'll add more if you're dealing with injuries, but I think this is now going to potentially be the 3rd year in a row that he's gone with 5 receivers on his 53-man roster to start the year. Now, we know that can fluctuate going, throughout the season, but certainly this is a way that he likes to go about assembling the 53-man. It's going to have interesting implications, not only at wide receiver, but other positions as well.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see what the ripple effect is going to be, because I think right now we can safely say that the 5 guys here for Denver's wide receiver core, I think we could probably solidify it on the 53 right now. Courtland Sutton, Marvin Mims, Pat Bryant, Troy Franklin, Trent Sherfield Jr. That's it. I don't see them keeping 6 now, because you and I have had this conversation. If they keep 6, Vele is that 6th guy. I don't see there being anybody right now, even one of these undrafted guys, who I think the undrafted crop of players, they've had a tremendous offseason here. I do not think that they are going to factor into this equation here. 5 guys is it. And when you factor in what Evan Ingram can do at the tight end, essentially you have 6 receivers in terms of volume, athleticism, high trade impact, things like that. But I think realistically speaking now, with that being said here, Sayre, what do the roles of this wide receiver room look like here? As we've heard Sean Payton say as well, he doesn't necessarily believe in pecking order. He believes in roles. We know Courtland's role. He's going to be the big X. He's going to move around the slot. But what do you see from guys like Marvin Mims, Troy Franklin, Pat Bryant, and Sherfield in terms of the roles that they could play?
I feel like all of them can kind of play different and versatile roles, right? I mean, we know that Marvin can play on the outside, but also be used as a gadget player. We've seen Troy Franklin be used on the outside, but I think he can also play in the slot. And I think Pat Bryant can play that big slot role as well, with his physicality and just the way that he kind of is able to hide himself in the thickness of, hey, we got linebackers here, you got a safety here, you got a slot corner here. He can find those soft spots playing from that slot position. And so I just think you have a bunch of guys who can play a lot of different spots for you and be assets there and kind of disguise what you're trying to do, right? And so that's what's really helpful here, is that the Broncos have those guys that, okay, yeah, you're not just pigeonholed into one spot. You can play different areas of this offense and excel at those areas, but we can also kind of mask what we're doing because of your skill set, right? Because Troy Franklin, he can burn you. Marvin Mims, he can burn you. But those guys also, Marvin led the team in yards after the catch. And Sean Payton said earlier this offseason, Troy Franklin might have an underrated skill that we have yet to unleash in terms of his after the catch ability. So you got to respect him deep. That's when you can hit him underneath. And so a lot of fun opportunities here, I think, for Sean Payton and the Broncos.
I think everything we've seen from Troy and from Pat Bryant in the preseason throughout training camp is a great indicator of how they'll be used because, yes, these guys aren't just limited to one spot. And I think probably Marvin is going to be the more unique player overall because you mentioned the outside, you mentioned the slot, but we know his role in the backfield. I mean, there's 4 different roles offensively that Marvin can play here for Sean. So he is kind of that gadget, as you mentioned, and I don't want to use gadget as like a limitation, as like he's only a gadget player. Marvin can do more than what we have seen. I think Sean's going to unleash that, but it's when you can put Courtland in the slot at times and isolate him in a matchup against a smaller nickel defender, or depending on the personnel, maybe a linebacker that where Courtland's bigger, faster, stronger. You could do the same thing with Troy, with Marvin, with Pat, and then don't even get me started with Evan Ingram and the move around ability as that joker, where he could do a little bit of everything in the backfield, underneath, across the middle, vertically to the outside. This is playing out to be kind of like Sean Payton's like perfect storm. He's like a mad scientist right now. He's like, this week I can do this with this guy. It opens things up here for this Broncos offense. I'm excited about it. But, I mean, Sayre, this wide receiver room, it's going to be fun to watch this year. Having been at all these practices, there is something that just feels different about this position group. Bo in his second year, Sean with the confidence he has, and with the element of there being an emphasis on getting the run game going. If that happens, if that takes off, this Broncos offense is going to be a scary one here in 2025. With that said, Broncos Country, we appreciate you for tuning in to this bonus episode, Locked On Broncos. Catch Sayre and I tomorrow as we talk about 3 players, including Audric Estime, who have the most to prove in a final audition against the New Orleans Saints on Saturday. Make sure you check that out wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube.